Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast based on writers sitting around drinking coffee or wine and talking about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Your hosts today are John Schmidt, Chaz Benchley, and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 29, A Year in Retrospect. What did we do this year? Well, we started a podcast. We finished some novels here and there.
We did finish some novels.
We wrote some short stories.
Some excellent short stories.
We got things published here and there.
Yes, poetry was done and inflicted on poor, innocent listeners.
Beautiful poetry, too. We also, a little while back, for those of us who follow us on Facebook, introduced the idea that if you wanted to ask us any questions, we were open to that. And I thought this would be a great time to stop and look at those and say, what were the questions that were asked? So I shall read them to both of you. And let's start and say, Chaz,
Hello.
Because you've been published most. Were you ever told this could be published if you made some sort of major character change? Did you do it?
I have so many stories.
Tell us a story.
The first and quickest was the time when my first novel was coming out. And my publisher's lawyers asked me to check with the police and the Samaritans in Newcastle. The Samaritans is a suicide charity.
Right.
I'm sorry, a suicide helpline.
Well, fair.
And asked me to check because the book was a thriller. Set explicitly in Newcastle and explicitly about the Samaritans. And they asked me to check that I hadn't used the names of any real policemen or real Samaritans. So I checked, and the Samaritans said, no, that's fine. Nobody of that name here. And the police said, most of these names are fine. But we do have a policeman on the roll with this particular name. So you'd probably better change that. And the trouble was, that was the name of my lead character, who was an alcoholic ex-policeman who'd been chucked out of the force for beating up a prisoner. I did have to change that, and it's weird, changing a name at the very end, because the whole book has been constructed around the rhythms of the name you used. So I had to find something that fitted the same rhythms. And it still never sounds right to me. But there's that.
Did you do it like a matter? Speaking of rhythm, was it like, David Blake, two-syllable, one-syllable, or one-syllable, two?
Absolutely. And I kept the same initial letters.
Okay.
So it was one-syllable, two. And we ended up with Paul Farrow.
Okay.
I think.
Paul Farrow.
Yeah.
I don't know any Paul Farrows.
No.
So
there was that. There was the retrospective one, where I was told very clearly late in the process that this book would not have been published. This was my first fantasy, and it would not have been published if the gay elements had been any stronger than they are.
I see. Well, that's hopefully different today. But yeah.
Yeah, it was, this was late 90s, so 20-some years ago.
Right.
And I still have a 1-star Amazon review on that book, which says, I thought I was reading epic fantasy until suddenly it turned into homosexual pornography.
Really?
Yes.
Can I see your review? Because I would love to read it. The comments on Amazon make it for me. Sometimes...
Now I've got to find the book and say, I thought I was reading
homosexual fantasy. Oh my God, and it turned into a plot. What the hell, man?
The book's called Tower of the King's Daughter.
The Tarot of the King's Daughter.
Is that tarot as in the card?
No, Tower.
Tower.
Okay.
Sorry, my English accent is...
He's having some wine, too.
I'm having some wine.
There is wine all over.
There is. I was told mine is more in an earlier process of some of my earlier short stories. And frankly, that was just feedback of you have to fix this one thing, or you have to... And it was, I think, which character it was, is you need to keep you can't do this, you have to do that, because there was just something that didn't make sense to anybody else.
Oh, okay.
And it made sense entirely in my brain, but when 4 out of 5 members associated says, Jeannie, that makes no sense, like, apparently.
Can I tell you another horror story from publishing?
God, yes.
Please.
I wrote this book.
It's Christmas. It's the Christmas season. Through 12th night, all of the horror and ghost stories belong to us.
Absolutely. No, I wrote this book. Again, it's a historical fantasy, and it's called Bridge of Dreams. It's called, and I wrote it and I sent it in to my agent, as one does, and my agent said, Chaz. It's basically told in 2 voices, and basically he said, I love one of these voices, I don't like the other. I think you should work that voice over again before I send it on. So I worked that voice over again, and then he sent it on to my American agent, who had actually done the deal, and she wrote back and said, Chaz, I love one of these voices, but I don't like the other one. And of course, it was the other one. So I basically wrote that whole book twice before a publisher ever saw it.
That's kind of funny.
Yes, I was not laughing at the time.
Here's another one. We'll start with John on this. Did you always write poetry like you do now? Or did you start with grade school Jack and Jill and then develop your current style?
Oh, God. Poetry is... Okay, so I am, as a poet, I'm a performer. And so every poem is styled for the stage it's going to be heard on. Going one question back, I actually had someone say, I never want to hear a poem about me. It's not that they dislike the work. It's just that they never want a poem about them. They never want the spotlight. So I had to quietly take a pain and throw it away. I got involved in a historical organization, and I read a lot of poets. And so initial poetry, in the medieval system, you copy the masters. And I copied various masters and read various things, but I was always more impressed with Ogden Nash than with E.E. Cummings, although he's an amazing poet, but it wasn't what impressed me. And so, but then you start reading the Trouvères, the medieval poetry, and you start performing poetry. And you come away, poems you write for yourself as a youth are nowhere near as stringent, rigid, or frankly strident as you need to perform on a stage in a poetry slam. And I did a few poetry slams, not enough, maybe more next year. And so the second part of it is that I went from writing poetry because poetry to writing poetry because performance, and specifically impromptu performance, and that requires developing certain skills that really you have to accumulate a lot of rhymes, you have to accumulate a lot of knowledge. It's a joyful process, but there's no way I could have done it as a schoolboy. Which is why when you ask like a word like petard, I'm so excited because I've accumulated petard.
We're never letting go. Petard's the word of the year in 2019.
The decade.
Yeah, poetry. It's tragically, my first poem no longer survives. But I remember writing it, and it was science fiction. I would have been 6 or 7, and it was about aliens who were blue on one side and red on the other. I wish I still had it, but then no. I of course I wrote poetry at school when I was a kid. Because I was going to be a writer, and that meant writing everything. And of course, whatever poetry I was writing was hugely influenced by whatever poet I was reading. My T.S. Eliot phase was fabulous. And then I went on writing poetry till I was 25, and gave up. I decided, I forswore poetry because it occurred to me that I was spending a lot of time doing a lot of work, and I wasn't ever going to be anything more than a second-rate poet. Whereas if I had that time extra to work on my prose, I could be a first-rate novelist. And yeah, that mattered to me. It also has to be said that since I gave up writing poetry, I have written the best poems of my life.
No pressure.
No, that's the point, really. It doesn't... I mean, there have only been 3 that I recall. But one I needed for a book, so I wrote it. One, friends of mine were getting married, and they had met as eclipse chasers. It's a long, beautifully romantic story, which I will not go into now. And they asked me... I was her best man, and she asked me to read something. Find something to read, she said, at the ceremony. So, of course, I looked for poems, romantic poems about eclipses, and I couldn't find one. So I wrote one, under a pseudonym, so that they wouldn't know it was me. Because it was, the day was not about me. And bless them, they really, really liked it, and they printed it out, and it hangs yet on the door of their bathroom. And then another one, a friend published a photograph, which moved me to verse, and that almost never happens to me.
Was that the Petrichlor poem?
Yes, that's the Petrichlor.
Okay,
poem.
because
Yes.
I love that poem. I posted it in my cubicle at work. So
All right.
when I stood up and looked out the window, I was on the 5th floor, and I could see the clouds. I could see if there were rain clouds.
Yeah.
Next year has, I believe, 4 eclipses. So we're going to come back to that eclipse poem.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Which would be wonderful. My first poem I still remember.
Uh-huh.
Toes are nifty, toes are neat, but what toes is fraying feet.
Fair enough.
And as you can see, I loved Ogden Nash.
That's brilliant.
Fringe. That's right up there with love them little mousies. Mousies,
Yes.
what I love to eat. Bite
Totally,
their little heads off, nibble on their tiny feet.
Which is a country western song.
Yeah. Yeah, still.
Twang, twang, twang.
Some of my first poetry was taking the words and songs and changing them. So I guess it was filk first.
Uh-huh.
I prefer the term contrefait.
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 Where did you come across the term contrefait?
It's French.
Yes, I
Yes.
can tell. It's not a term I'm familiar with.
You le connais?
It's because in the earlier years, it was a quick way of, well, where did you get the tune? Oh, it's contrefait. I've taken the
You've
tune.
taken it from somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then for me, Henry Beard and his poetry for cats.
Cats. Yes.
That was, that's how to write in different styles. So that helped me go out if I wanted to write in something else. So, how to write like Shakespeare, how to write like Carlos, I've said his name.
Walter Carlos Williams?
Walter Carlos Williams, and,
Something like that.
Yeah.
Byron,
Yes.
Shelley, Keats, etc. Yeah. Who is your favorite character that you have ever written, Jess?
This is unfair. How can I pick a favourite? I adore them all. I was told long ago that all my girls were really boys anyway. And ever since then, I've paid a degree of attention to the characters I write about. And I have this total predilection for 2 types. I have fey boys and sensible girls. And I honestly, there was one character I wrote 2 books about and loved enough that I then took his name and used it as a pseudonym for 2 different books.
Ben McCallum?
Ben McCallum.
Yes.
That's
Ben
the
McCallum.
one.
Knew it. Ask a mother which is the favourite of her
You
children.
love them all.
I was my mom's favourite. End of story.
I am totally convinced. My mother did not play favourites. She was equal with us all, and I'm convinced I was her favourite.
Yes.
Yes.
Mine has got to be Bluebird. And I know very few people have actually read it yet, but
Yeah. That's okay. We'll
Bluebird
fix that.
contains all of my rage.
Yes.
And I have so much.
Yes, you do.
I think I have at least
And
a
it's
trilogy,
pure and
possibly
clear.
5 of them. And it is pure and clear of the frustration of an unjust world and a legal system that rewards only those who further the best political causes. And nobody cares of the underdogs. Nobody cares of the victims that are ugly or unattractive or poor. And so Bluebird is my, I'm going to call her a social justice warrior that advances her cause by murdering people.
So social justice barbarian?
That's right.
There you go.
Did I tell you I'm currently writing a hang on, let me get this right. Space pirate ship social justice warrior merchant banker story.
We will read it with great glee, indeed. My second favorite was a little brief character that showed up in the historic fantasy noir novel I just finished, and I'm not pitching now. It's a little character named Jenny O'Malley.
Ah, she's lovely.
Jenny, Jez has been reading through it with me and helping me make sure that I don't be egregiously American in a land of England. But Jenny is in there, and she's sitting there, and she's been a bad girl, and she's been sold into the system, and she's very resigned about it all. And she's planning to go off. She knows she's going to be deported to, Australia. She thinks the Queen of Australia, or maybe Canada. Canada needs a queen, And I like Jenny a lot too.
Jenny is awesome.
Yeah,
I have hopes of seeing her again.
Oh yes, she definitely turns up in the second book.
I do in fact have a favorite character, although I've published no major stories or novels. Due to the challenge from a friend, I started writing, of course, a YA cowboy adventure focusing on a little more historicity. So it's
historical accuracy.
Historicity?
Historicity. It's not. I'm not trying to be completely accurate, although it's fascinating. But Nate Love, whose name keeps changing, is a young man who is a child of slaves living in West Texas who goes on a cattle drive. And what I love about him is that he has the trait that you most wanted in a cowboy, which was actually patience.
Okay.
That makes, yeah.
But writing him has been fascinating and illuminating. But anyway.
Dude, the next question that we had from our listeners is, do your characters ever show up in your dreams?
Okay. Allow me to twist that one around a little bit, because when I was starting to write my first novel, The Samaritan, it is a serial killer thriller. And
can you say that again, please?
Serial killer thriller.
Thank you. I just love it how you say that.
The antagonist, the evil guy, the killer. The first, I was struggling. I had a plot of sorts because, I hadn't published a novel before, so I was kind of required to produce a synopsis, and I had a plot, and I didn't really get him yet. I didn't understand him. So late one night, I sat down on my typewriter, remember? Fed in a sheet of paper, how cute. And basically I spent the next 2 hours writing what was going through his head as he worked up to killing someone. And it took me 2 hours to write 2 pages, which is ridiculously slow. And I got there and went straight from there to bed and had the scariest night of my life, because I swear I was dreaming his dreams all night. It was, your dreams may be weird, but they have a familiar grammar to them. They're your dreams. And this was not. This was somebody else in my head. And that was scary.
And you?
I'll dream about friends, and I mine my friends for characteristics in poetry and in my steely-eyed, square-jawed friend Jeannie, for instance. But I don't dream about characters in movies, and I don't dream about characters in books. I just dream generic. So no, but it's not just dreaming about my own. I don't dream about anyone's characters.
See, when I looked at this and said, do your characters ever show up in your dreams? My response was, where the hell do you think they come from? I woke up Christmas morning and said, thank you, my darling Joe, for bringing me a cup of coffee, and I have to go write a story now. and which is frequently where a lot of them started off, and some of them that start off, oh, this is a short story. Oh, my bad, it's a series.
Okay.
So that's
because I do not mind my dreams at all for fiction.
I just watch movies in my heads and then I write them down because apparently they're not a movie I watched yet.
Okay.
So I am going to make a fortune, by the way. The minute that we have the ability to put on little electrodes and record dreams and give them to people who don't dream and want to, gonna be a billionaire. Freaking more money than what's his face from Amazon. Jeff Bezos, look out, I'm coming for you. I'm going to be so rich.
A provider of content.
Provider of content. I'm a content creation queen. Empress. Here's one. If you could rewrite a classic story, which one and why, and what would you change?
Rewrite a classic story.
Classic story.
Again, I have to twist that one because I want to bring back the Penny Dreadfuls, the Nichols, the Frank Reed books, which became Tom Swift books. There's Paul Guinan, and I'll get you the link, did a wonderful book on the series. But before,
again, John, what series is this? I don't know these books.
This is an American series of chapbooks that are all about the whiz-bang wonders of the future, pretty much. Okay. And they start in the 1870s, I think. I have to go look it up. Yeah. With steam men and ended in the 20s with electric men. And you would get, it's before comic books, but very comic booky. Okay. But they would talk about the wonders of technology and having all these adventures all over the world. And you can see Johnny Quest as a later cartoon sort of filled the niche a little bit. And there's a book called, there's a book on Frank Reed. There's also a few other books, but things like Crossing the Plains of America, having a race between a steam-powered horse and a steam-powered man. And I would bring that back as chapbooks, probably to the internet as stories, or perhaps as a podcast. And then the second thing I want to rewrite is I want to rewrite Romeo and Juliet to take out some of the political things and leave in... I hate the plot of the novel because I just can't relate to Romeo well enough.
There's a novel?
Play. Novel, story. Okay. Right? How much wine have I had? Not enough.
Not enough.
Never enough. But the words, the scenes, the way he sets it is so beautiful. I'm torn, hating it or not. And we do, of course, have a friend who rewrote another, according to her, non-Shakespearean play, and specifically Hello, Carol Wolfe. Wonderful. The Queen's Cookies was fantastic. And I would like to do that. What about you, Jeannie? I know you've got something you didn't like.
Oh, well, now here's the problem is... Wasn't it the line from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet is, my heart's love is sprung from my heart's hate, or vice versa? I mean,
something like, yeah.
I love, as you all know, Sherlock Holmes.
Indeed.
I love A Study in Scarlet.
Yep.
The first 10 pages. Because one of the things that frustrated me about... because he got paid by the word, and that's convinced what it was, is the interesting how the murder was gotten in and done was fantastic, but then you were treated to some other character telling you, some farcical story about these Mormon guys wandering across Colorado in the Midwestern America. And some of it I could tell that one, he never really didn't know Mormons, nor had he really been to Midwestern America that much, I don't think. But it's... Come on, Arthur, bring it back and make it more about the monkey. I don't really want to hear about everybody else. I want to hear about King Kong. So that was mixing my metaphors there. But I would definitely fix 3 of his first and make them just concise and more about Sherlock and less about strangers.
I reread the whole of Sherlock some time ago and was disappointed by half the stories. Yeah. They're not as clever as they want to be. They're not as clever as they think they are.
But I do love everybody else who's taken their shot and swings at, especially Shadows over Baker Street.
Right.
Combining Sherlock with genius. Well done, all of them.
Yeah, there is so much Sherlockiana out there.
Yes.
Some of it is splendid. Some of it is not. It also has to be said. And I was going to say that I really have no interest in this modern thing of retelling classic stories. And then I realised that I've been doing nothing else for the last 5 years because I do this Patreon thing where I have a mad passion for the Chalet School books of Eleanor M. Brent Dyer, which are classic English girls' boarding school stories. And I have, for several years now, I have been not retelling those stories, but adopting pretty much everything from her work and resetting it on Mars. So yeah, English girls' boarding school stories on Mars. And I love it.
I ferret. All right, here's a question. Is there a part of the writing process that you hate doing?
Every time I am sitting there actually writing a book, creating prose, I am thinking, God, I wish I could get this stage over so I can get to the editing, because I like editing so much more. And every time I am editing, I'm sitting there thinking, God, I hate this process. I wish I could get back to writing fresh stuff. I'm a constantly dissatisfied person. I hate it all.
You're conflicted.
I'm conflicted.
Inside and out.
I love it all. I mean, at this very moment, I have a deadline for tomorrow night, and I am maybe halfway through a short story, and I have spent the last week thinking I'm not going to get there. But every day, the gears of my mind have meshed with this story to the point that every day I'm writing more and more and more. And it is still faintly conceivable that I might get there, which is probably why I'm here.
Excellent. Stalling. Well
Stalling,
done.
exactly.
How about you, John? Is there a part of the process you hate?
Since I haven't fully engaged with the process usefully, it's obvious that I hate most of it. But what I hate... No, and we had a off-camera, off-microphone discussion of it. Since I'm a performer, I hate hearing myself. I'm also not disciplined enough on editing, and that is my kick for the next year, is to not NaNoWriMo, which I failed to complete, but edit. I'm going to take every work and edit it twice, and then fling it into the wilderness and see what happens. Nice.
Sorry, I was just going, edit it twice, gonna find out who's naughty, and another word for naughty.
We're overusing naughty.
I've used very 22 times this chapter.
Yes, indeed. Apparently there are people who go through their manuscript and get the machine to count.
I do that.
Do you?
I do sometimes. Well, mostly for me, it was finding, because I have 3 words that, because it has been brought to my attention that I overuse them, slightly, slowly, and very, that I actually do a search on them to look and say, is it appropriate there? Oh dear, I see I've used it twice in within 2 paragraphs.
Well, yeah,
so,
but I mostly I trust myself to spot those. And then, there will be an editor and a copy editor and a proofreader who might point them out too.
I'm just willing to let a machine do a little bit of my job.
Yeah, you see, I'm not. A machine doesn't understand when I want the repetition, when I'm driving.
But it's got a fuck off button.
Yeah, I know it does. But I don't want to introduce that mechanical element into an organic process.
Okay. I hate writing synopses.
Everyone hates writing synopses. There is no one on this planet, and I say this knowing that someone is going to stick their hand up and say,
oh, God, I'm so great.
Yeah.
And by the way, if anybody out there really loves writing synopses,
we have books.
We have things for you. Please give us a call. Give us a thing saying you are the queen of it. You will not find us ungrateful.
Yes. No, there was. I swear there was nobody who actually likes writing synopses. Or at the other end, writing blurbs, writing cover copy. Writing marketing matter.
Yeah.
All of that. It's revolting and should never happen.
It's true, and yet at the same time I rely upon it when I go look at new things to read.
Yes, this is why there used to be professional...
editors,
not
marketing
even
people.
editors, copy people. Penguin employed someone who wrote all their cover copy for all their books. And this was the case for... most publishers, it was your editor's job, and they would ask the author if they had any suggestions, notions. And what usually happened was that I would say, no, I hate this, I can't do it, you do it. And then they would send me what they'd done and I'd rewrite it. But yeah, no, it used actually to be a job for some people.
Yeah.
And those were better days. But these days they put more and more back on the author. And that's one of them.
Yeah, that's one of those things. Oh, you're supposed to include it when you send out for query letters, which I wanted to say query letters, but to be honest, I hate synopses even more than query letters. In terms of, we're kind of near the bottom of the half hour here, so I just wanted to pimp out a couple things. Juliette Wade joined us. She has a book that's coming out in February. Chaz's Creator School Volume 2 is complete and available on Patreon. We'll put the list. I actually finished that Christmas story, edited it, sent it out, got an acceptance, sold it, and it is on Amazon within a day and a half, which is unheard of.
That is
Kudos to the ladies who run the Scary Snippets for Halloween and Christmas. It's purely royalties, so I told them to keep mine and buy themselves a latte because
nice.
It's flash fiction.
It's absolutely. Obviously, this is one of the ways that the business has changed quite strikingly. Is the speed of getting. But I still remember my favourite writing and selling a story. I had a December 31st midnight deadline, as indeed I do tomorrow, and I really should get back to it. But hey, I'm here, and I hadn't started it before the morning of December the 31st. And I thought, bloody hell, I am bloody going to bloody do this bloody. And I sat down and I wrote a story that day. And I sent it by email because you could just about, this is late 90s, I think, you could do that. And trekked off to a New Year's Eve party and came back gloriously drunk in the early hours and checked my email because we did that in those days. And there was an acceptance waiting for me in my inbox. I loved that.
We will put links to the stories and the interesting things we mentioned on the website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. As you've seen, this was our answering of email one, so please, if you have other questions for us, feel free to keep sending them in. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web support magic is brought to you by Deirdre McGaffey-Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spider is David Welsh. Our intro music is Pretty Maid Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with a Morning Person, both by Michael Ingberg. You can hear more from Michael Ingberg on manyhatsmusic.com. Our podcast sponsor is Menage a Trois, a very, very lovely red wine.